Good morning. I hope you're doing well. Oh, good evening, good afternoon. I think I'm going to finish the final part today, and again, these last few parts I've just decided they don't need me writing these specific notes and reading them out. They're intuitive, and they're looking at the broader aspects. And this last part, part 10, sorry, it's part 9, which I think is a better number to finish on than having 10, because I had thought to do 2 with this part and then a second one, a final one. So part 9, Lucy Letby, A Different Story. The title of it is just Lucy, which in a way to say that is presumptuous, because I don't know her, but I know what we've done, what we've looked at so far, and that so many other people are looking at, is remove the focus away from the person that's been scapegoated, and we look at all the reasons, the actual reasons for why those deaths occurred, and why there was that spike in deaths across that period of time. And we've covered them, so many people have covered them to such a degree. In a sense, to keep focusing on Lucy Letby is wrong, because that was the crime against her, is that they did focus on her rather than look at the actual reasons, rather than look at the actual causes. I've got an owl on this mug. It's not a symbol of, well, it's a symbol of an owl, you know, it's not anything. So that's the mistake, you see. That's, well, mistake, arrogance, what ends up being absolute wickedness, and in order to protect your own interests. So Breary starts, well, he's looking for a victim, he's looking for somebody to blame, because the deaths are reflecting bad on him and the other consultants, and then the hospital, but particularly about him. And then Jai Arams feels the same. Oh, this can't be happening on our watch, there's got to be someone to blame. Can't be us, can't be the hospital, can't be the pathogens, we've got to find someone. Had Lucy Letby not been working there, it could have very well been a different nurse who was working there. Someone who they could have got for, eventually, had they pursued the same course, for 5 of the murders, because they didn't have so many crosses down, because there wasn't somebody that was there all the time. Still would have got them for some. They were determined to offload responsibility and blame onto someone who's completely innocent. And to say, it's not that it's just, the reasons why, I think, is that Lucy was so good at her job and so conscientious and so willing to report doctor errors, and so most of the time doing more hours than any other individual nurse, and doing more nights than any other individual nurse. And then most deaths in hospital would occur, so I've read and heard, overnight, night shifts. That's often when they occur. So that's another reason why she would be there on more occasions when those deaths happened, because she does more nights. It's not rocket science, but they don't want to, because based on, related back to the last video, it's the fiction in their mind about, they've just created this story, which works for them, works for the consultants, works for the police, because they got a really big, in their mind, a really interesting case that's going to have all this reflected glory back on them. Works for Evans for the same reasons, and for money reasons, and for his own little bit of power and fame. These are pathetic creatures. Pathetic creatures. Low vibrational beings, entities. They've got no interest in what happened to those babies. That's the kind of conclusion by doing it this way, from the external aspects, and then leaving Lucy Letby to the end, it just makes me realise that all these other factors, all the other people involved, got no interest in what's happening to those babies. The parents obviously have, most deeply. And Lucy had a great feeling for what happened to those babies at the time, and she said so at the time and during the time to many people. And there was much evidence given about that, about how it affected her personally. And she kept on putting it back on herself and saying, well, should I have done more? Could I have done more? Wanting assurances from people like that Dr. A character, who then basically stabs her in the back, essentially. It betrays her to all intents and purposes, even though right up to July 2016 he's praising her and saying she's done everything she could. He'd write a reference for her, and then there's that switch, because self-interest takes over. Oh my God, the police are involved. Oh, I don't want anything to do with that. And that's when Lucy Letby apparently writes in a note that she thought he was her friend, and that she cared for him, and he switched sides, because suddenly it became important that he had to protect himself, because somebody was being blamed and he didn't want any guilt by association. And that's the cowardice that surrounds situations like this. And unfortunately it does extend to other people that clearly believed in Lucy Letby's innocence all the way through it. Someone like Karen Rees, that said in that interview that, and that's something I missed out yesterday in terms of these, when I said about that tweet that the journalist had done saying she never protested her innocence, Lucy Letby. It was strange, that absurd, insane tweet. Well, I missed out the bit that Karen Rees told us. It said for a period of over a year they used to meet once a week or whatever it was, socially. And Lucy Letby would be crying and upset each time and every time, and just saying she doesn't understand why she's being persecuted and focused on like this. Each one of those are protestations of, I hesitate to even call it innocence, because she's never done anything wrong. It's protestations for, moreover, it's protestations of saying, I'm a good nurse, I've done everything that I've been trained to do. Nobody's telling me. Nobody's telling me here what's wrong with my clinical practice. And as Karen Rees said in her interview as well, she said that the Breary came to her and said that he's concerned about her clinical practice. Nothing to do with deliberate harm or attacks or murders or attempted murders. But, as Karen Rees further went on to say, he didn't give her any details. He didn't say, well, she's done this wrong, she's done that wrong, she forgot to do nothing at all. That's what Karen Rees says in her interview, and I believe her. He gave me nothing, is what she said, meaning Breary. Gave me nothing, because there was nothing. And so the constant protestations and upset and trauma that Lucy Letby was going through, it being removed from her duties and being put in an admin position after training and being really good at her job. The trauma, and this is all way before the first arrest for that whole year, between 20, subsequent to 20, more than a year, subsequent to July 2016, when Lucy Letby's moved into the admin position, right up to the arrest. She's doing those admin jobs, isn't she? She's not. She's still working for the NHS. And she's meeting up with Karen Rees and is upset again and again and again. That's when Karen Rees goes, I can't believe somebody would have been able to act for that long. The subtext of that is that she doesn't believe she's acting. She knows. And then, unfortunately, apparently she said, she did deceive me then, Karen Rees, of Lucy Letby, which is a shame. But again, it's somebody protecting themselves, and it's somebody protecting themselves, their job, their pension, etc., 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 wanting to distance from someone who's been convicted, which is the same dynamic as I keep banging on about the witch trials of old. Most people, once somebody's accused, they want to distance themselves from them, even if they were very close, even if they believe them, up to a certain extent. Once it gets too hot, they'll move back, they'll move away. And that's what the journalists do as well. As I said yesterday, even the ones that have got their own views on it. They don't want to touch it because it's like getting too close to the scapegoat, and they don't want any business of that. Don't want any part of it. There's been really good work being done in detail by, as I said yesterday, Chris J. Clark Esquire on Twitter to do with the notes, working with a graphologist. I've looked at the notes. My personal approach to them now, while finding all the way they're being deciphered absolutely fascinating and very valuable, but just from my own perspective at the moment, it's just that I look at that, the green note, so-called, but it's on green paper, you know, and I just say there's somebody in absolute distress as a result of being persecuted, stating very clearly that they've done nothing wrong, but making certain statements which are about what other people say about her, what other people believe about her, and how she's internalizing the distress and the guilt that they're trying to make her feel and put on her, because that's exactly what they're doing. And as somebody said, and a number of people, and I'm sorry if I can't remember who said it, these techniques for emptying out your emotions, all these conflicting and complicated emotions when you're under great stress, especially when you're being persecuted in this way and you can't understand it, can't get a grip on the reality of why somebody would, all these people you've worked with would be doing this. You're in a hell, you're in a state of hell. You know, these are cognitive therapy techniques to do that. And the notes aren't meant for other people to read. They're not meant for anyone to read. They're not meant for the newspapers to read, or the public to read, or police to read. They're notes to self as a process of dealing with this emotional pain and trauma and distress caused by other people to her. Not what she's done, no harm that she's done to anyone else, any other human being, but the harm that's being done to her as the process of persecution. And that's all I need to consider, personally. It's there, straight away in front of you. And everything else, you know, the notes to the notes of sympathy for the triplets. It's just somebody, a soft-hearted person, a caring person, as well as doing her clinical and technical work to a very high standard. She's emotionally involved, and that's what drove her to be a nurse in the first place. So we hear is that she had a difficult birth herself, and then as she grew up, she said, I want to be a nurse, I want to give something back. That's why she's done these, and she's 25, 26, 27 at this time. She's done this extra training at the Liverpool Women's Hospital. She's one of the highest qualified nurses there. That's another reason why she's going to be there more of the time, because there's a shortage of nurses available with that level of training, for that specialist training. So that's what I'm feeling now. It's not about defending her. There's nothing to defend about. She's done nothing wrong. We don't have to defend her. Don't have to defend why she acts this way, that way, or the other way, because she's done nothing wrong. The crimes are in other people's minds. They're constructions for their own purposes, various purposes, most of them to do with money, or vanity, greed, power trips, avoiding themselves being blamed. The crimes are in other people's minds. We should not know about the private life of Lucy Letby. We shouldn't have the access to her personal photographs when she's enjoying herself, and family photographs. We shouldn't have access to those notes of her inner turmoil that she was doing as a kind of self-therapy. We shouldn't have access to them. The only reason we've got them is because of the aggression and persecution of other people against her. So we, in a sense, that's my feeling, we've got no business analysing her. And I know it's hard, it's been part of it, and once somebody is brought to court, then It's natural. You want to say, well, I don't think she's guilty for this reason, psychologically, whatever, based on whatever your knowledge you think you might have is, or just the logic of it, really. Just one of the main things, starts there in January 2012. 3.5 years. Even that, forget what Evans says about all the stuff he's trying to uncover. That shows the desperation of how insane his views are, how insane he is, how vile he is. 3.5 years of nothing, and then June 2015, absolute mayhem, causing mayhem. Three deaths, an attempted murder, quote unquote murders, and attempted murder in like less than 2 weeks. That's just, it doesn't make sense, because there is no sense in it, because it's not true, because it didn't happen like that. A lot of people are doing stuff to do with the idea of the seasonal viruses as well, that often happen in those June periods, and the June periods 2015 and 2016 are the high points of those spikes in deaths across those 2 years. The pathogens, the sepsis, the neck, it's all going on. It's all going on there. The lack of doctors, the many medical mistakes and aspects of negligence in terms of the treatment of those very poorly in pretty much all cases neonates. Well, in all cases, really, they're all dealing with so many things. Those poor little babies, in terms of their health, they're struggling, and they're certainly struggling in that neonatal unit with the systems that are operating there, and the lack of oversight over the spreading of these pathogens from the leaking hospital wastewater pipes. They're not guesses. They're real. They're real. They're real true facts, as opposed to anything that Evans is telling the world and telling the court. Lucy Letby can write in a work diary, LD for long day, a very standard abbreviation for a 12-hour shift for a nurse. You get some absolute clown in Cheshire Police deciding it's a code, saying hello, and then the bizarre, weird mainstream media pick it up and then repeat that story that it's a code. You can see how absurd it all is, and evil. And evil often comes out of absurdities, or they're aligned with absurdities like that. The same as the thing of coming back from Ibiza, I think it was, and I'm coming back with a bang, telling people, telling other colleagues and nurses that you're going to, and then that being read as well, I'm going to come back and really carry on my murder spree now. It just doesn't. It's if it wasn't so serious, it would be utterly. It's laughable, risible absurdities. And people are. I don't understand why people can't see that, but if they can't, they can't. And I think the reason is, as I was saying last night in the other video, that they want the other story. They don't want the story about the failing hospital and the nasty narcissistic consultants and the stupid police and the venal, greedy, sick, narcissistic Evans. They don't want that story. They want the serial killer nurse, and they want to have it, and they want to keep it. They don't want it to change now. They don't want it to change. They're kind of invested in it, and they enjoy it, and they like it, and it appeals to their sadistic qualities, as it did in the times of when people were accused of being witches. Quite very similar MO. The testimony of Lucy Letby's friend, the main one who came forward very bravely and honestly and courageously and movingly. That's what I said in a very early video, is that's the person I believe, in terms of from not knowing someone, and you get a real sense of that friendship and that friend and how long it's lasted. That's what I'm thinking. I'll restate it. It's just that we don't need to be defending Lucy Letby's personality or any way how she's reacted whatsoever. The big deal they made about her saying something to do with whether she's wearing a nightie, what she's wearing a nightie, and then the idiot prosecutor picks that up like it's a big deal. These latching onto these tiny, even if they were discrepancies, but I don't think they were. I think they were accurate. Lucy Letby was accurate about it. But the way they pounce on them shows you how weak everything that they're doing is. How weak, how duplicitous, how mendacious, how ugly, how unpleasant, how vicious it all is, because it's unreal. And you would have had the same things in the witch trials. They jump on little, either inconsequential or untrue things, a catalogue of them, and build them up bit by bit by bit, to then say, well, yeah, well, obviously you're a witch then, you know, obviously you're a serial killer then, because we think you're lying about what you said about what you were wearing on that day 3 years ago, whenever it was, you know, 5 years ago. The cruelty's there big time. The Cheshire Police released that bit of film with them surprising Lucy Letby at 6 in the morning. She's expected to go to work later that day, get her up at 6 in the morning, have the cameras outside to show and reveal it to everyone. That's the sadism. That's the sadism of those systems run by very, very, unfortunately, very stupid people. I'm not saying everyone in the Cheshire Police is, but the people on Operation Hummingbird, they got together their worst people to do that. And it's got to say something about the leadership of Cheshire Police as a whole, obviously. But I'm not impugning all the officers of the constabulary, obviously not. I'm talking about that operation, that disastrous, vicious takedown of an innocent person that was absolutely eager, willing, desirous, and completely uncaring in terms of whether the person's innocent or guilty. They just want the notch on their belt, you know, do that sort of video so they can see themselves as like mini celebrities for a while, you know. So yeah. And we could go through the whole thing about, you know, the idea of a serial killer, you know, the patterning of the alleged attacks and murders. They don't make sense either. The changing of the MO for them, the decision to, after the alleged air embolus attack technique is working so well that you suddenly switch to the insulin, and then you do the second insulin attack at a quarter the rate, put a quarter of the amount, even though the first one didn't make the baby crash even though the bloody blood test showed an amount that would kill an adult, let alone a baby. So it's just all so insane. And that's evil has to be kind of aligned with stupidity often, because if it was intelligent, it wouldn't probably be evil, you know. I think you get clever criminals and evil geniuses, so-called, but there's always the kind of a stupidity there as well, a dumbness, that because it's uncaring of reality. The prosecution don't care that blood test shows an amount that should have killed that baby. The prosecution, Dr. Milan, the biochemist prosecution, quote unquote expert, doesn't care that's that. Evans doesn't care. Police don't care. Jury doesn't care because it wasn't put across to them as it should have been that was such a problem. The judge doesn't care because he shouldn't have allowed those tests. They shouldn't have been admissible at all. Anyway, all the people that want what they want, which is to convict someone, even though there were no crimes, they don't care about the reality of what happened to those babies, or the reality of those tests, or the reliability of them. None. It's just, I know I'm drifting away, and this is what I've realised, that you look into this, you drift away, as you should, from Lucy Letby as a good, hard-working nurse trying to enjoy her life outside of work, buy her first house, someone who's dedicated, someone that the management would have paid, was wanting to pay to do a master's course, an extra training at Alderhay, until those bastard consultants got their evil way. And then they just drew more sickness towards them, all the appropriate sick, nasty, venal individuals in their various so-called professions, and it plugged that into what seems to me to be a very corrupt judicial system, and that's how you can convict an innocent person. That's how you can destroy their lives, because you're on a train then, you're on a track, and you won't get off it. You won't willingly get off it. Operation Hummingbird, after they've spent and they've had all this extra budgets, and they've spent millions after millions after millions, they're not going to go, oh God, we've realised now it's all wrong. It doesn't make sense what Evans is saying. It's all wrong. Even if they had some of those doubts in their minds, they're not going to tell anyone. No, they want the day in court. This is what Hughes says in the video. He says he had to give the appearance of an impartial investigation. Not the reality of it, but the appearance of it, because he's already got his eyes on what the defence are going to do in a court case. Even though at the same time he's saying we went in there not knowing whether it was the bad bug in the water. He can't have it both ways, but he wants it both ways. But he reveals himself that. I mean, I've done so much about him that it's not that I've done it. It's just that we can see so much about him. If you look at that video, that he's a fool. He's so foolish that he will reveal himself, as does Evans. Because their stupidity will out. And I thought, because I haven't got access to the whole trial, I can't think of the word now, the transcript. It's the interviews they've given afterwards when they're relaxed. That's when it leaks. That's when you get the leakage from Hughes and Evans and the others. And Breary and Jayaram. Jayaram saying he punched the air when he punched, this is him. He said, I punched the air when I realised that the police were finally going to get involved, that he's got his way, punched the air. So we drift away, continually we're pulled away, I believe, well I am, from Lucy Letby, from her private life, from her family life, from the life that she was building up, from her, and we're left with what should have been, to all of us, a nurse working in Cheshire, doing her very best, doing a very, very good job under very difficult circumstances, being one of the most reliable and most important members of that unit, and the most conscientious, who happens to be called Lucy Letby. But it was her, and she did that. But we shouldn't know about that, because she should never have been blamed for all the faults and all the wrongs systemically that were going on there. I hope I'm not over-flogging that, but that's the way it seems to me. It's not, you don't end up having to do a massive defence of an individual because they were never anything to do with it. They are only doing their best and doing good, and their clinical practice was never shown to be wanting. But the clinical practice of the doctors was, and it's documented. And there were many families at the time being represented by a Cheshire solicitor that were just on the cusp of bringing medical negligence cases, which might have unearthed, eventually, had a proper investigation been done, what was going on vis-a-vis the pathogens from the leaking hospital wastewater on that neonatal unit, which could have led to so many more cases being brought. And yeah, everything I think of, it doesn't end up being about Lucy Letby, because it shouldn't be about her, because she's nothing to do with, she's not instrumental in these babies dying. It's that trust, that unit, that hospital, the NHS as a whole. those doctors, actually, more than anyone. So yes, this has turned out to be a video that pulls away the focus naturally, and but unfortunately, this is the person that's been monstered and accused and convicted for not for something that somebody else did, but for something that didn't happen. I.e., there was no intended harm. There were no murders, and there were no attempted murders. So I'm going to sort of come to a close now, and in terms of the future, is just we're waiting to hear the result of the application for leave to appeal, and so we've heard that we should hear that, hopefully by the end of November. Certainly, I would have thought, and then if it's affirmed, if they get the right to appeal, then I believe, and so I've heard from people with a legal background, that we should hear the grounds that they brought. And then, is it possible that they'll say they're fundraising to get other experts on board to actually bring the appeal case? I don't know. It depends on the grounds, I suppose. But that's what I'm waiting. I think that's what we're waiting to hear. The next stage is waiting to hear the result of that application. I hope to God that there's some sense in some judge there's some ability to see past this hideous story that other people have confected and made up about an innocent person. And then it's unknown, isn't it? It's unknown what the strategies of the defence legal team, if they're the ones that are kept on, are going to be, and if there is a fundraising, to pay for the necessary experts there to be at the appeal, or whether that would happen once the convictions are quashed and a retrial is ordered. It might be at that stage, mightn't it? There's something that Science on Trial are talking about, this idea of a legal intervention. I've not looked that up, or I don't understand what that is really, but allegedly they've got Mark MacDonald, the KC, on board to look at the legal potentialities there regarding something called a legal intervention. But I don't know. I don't have any legal training. I mean, that's something that we'll see going forward, what the potentialities are for that to work, to affect something. I don't know how that will work in conjunction or in opposition or whatever with the current legal team. I just don't know. I don't know if anybody does. I don't know what it is. I could look into it, but try and research it, but I think it will become apparent as it moves forward as to what they're trying to do. As I had a chat with my friend, my best friend, and the idea, can you make a legal intervention from outside with other people that you're, with another barrister that hasn't been instructed by a solicitor, that the person themselves, i.e. Lucy Letby, has instructed, hasn't been asked for by the person that's wanting to appeal? I don't know. I just don't know. So that's going on. But we're waiting to hear, and I really hope we get some good news soon. And in the interim, I think this is going to be, I'll just hold off making videos about it until we hear something about the application for leave to appeal. This sort of summary series, which I thought was going to be like 9 or 10 short 5-minute videos, has turned out to be much longer, because it's focusing on, largely, 90% of it plus is not on Lucy Letby. Of course it's not. It's on the actual causes and the failures and the design of this infernal this infernal set-up and stitch-up, and the crimes that are in other people's minds for their own sets of reasons, and this horrible machinery of the state, and the apparatus of the state and the so-called judicial system, and that police investigation, so-called. Well, it was that they didn't even do one. I mean, it was all done for them by Evans and the consultants. They were just there, and they were just spending a whole bunch of money pretending it's fabrication. It's just a mirage. It's theatre again. It's this horrible dark theatre to produce this infernal lie about what happened to those babies, to cover all that up, the reality of that up, and then find instead someone to take the blame and to destroy their lives and destroy the happiness of their parents, and obviously, devastate them and devastate the parents of those babies, to tell them that their children have been murdered, or there'd been attempted murders against them, to devastate those parents. Hard enough the bereavement that they had, the crime against them, the moral crime conducted by and instigated by the consultants, Evans and his assorted other foolish experts, so-called, the police, the CPS. The crimes against, the moral crimes against Lucy Letby and her family and her friends that care about her, and against the parents and families of those babies concerned. Those are the crimes. Those are the crimes here. And I just hope, as I'm sure many of you do, I just hope those crimes do not go unanswered and unpunished. Look forward to talking again when we get some good news. I'm going to think positively about it when we get some good news regarding Lucy Letby's appeal. God bless, and all the best to you all, and thanks for listening if you have, and thank you for all the comments, and take care. All the best. Bye-bye.